All right, so guys, Notre Dame to the Big Ten could be happening very soon. You take a look at this tweet. Notre Dame will let everyone know in a matter of days. You can say what you want about the institution, but they are professional, and no lingering over the question only damages other institutions. Big Ten expects to get their answer very soon. That kind of seems like a contradiction considering Notre Dame seems to always let these situations linger. But what this tweet is saying is maybe we get an answer from Notre Dame possibly joining the Big Ten in the coming days or the coming weeks, which would make a lot more sense because Oregon wants to join the Big Ten as soon as possible. And for Oregon to join the Big Ten first wants the answer from Notre Dame. So in a matter of days or a matter of weeks, we could get the Super Conference officially basically complete, or I don't know how many teams they want, but at that point it would be 18 teams, then maybe Washington, maybe Stanford on top of that to get to the 20-team Super Conference. Of course, you've also got the idea that's kind of cropped up of the Big 12 creating their super conference in theory. Now, it would be worse than the Big 10 and the SEC's big-time conferences, but at this point, I said in my last video, they're just trying to stay relevant, and the idea is if Oregon also leaves the Pac-12, the Pac-12 basically dies out, and all of those teams in the Pac-12 become up for grabs for the Big 12 to potentially latch onto. We know the Big 12 losing Texas and Oklahoma, but gaining those 4 teams from the American. They could also add more teams from the Pac-12 if Oregon does leave for the Big 10. Because at that point, the Pac-12 becomes so undesirable. What does Stanford do? You know, I saw an article, maybe Stanford becomes an independent. It certainly makes sense. But if this tweet is correct, which it seems like the idea of us waiting until next year, I know I've said I think that's what's going to happen, but it's like Oregon needs to get out of the Pac-12 ASAP because they're about to get another TV contract and they want to leave before that goes into effect because these TV contracts are like decades, like 10-year-long contracts. So this is a very interesting situation. Could we get a decision from Notre Dame to join the Big Ten, which they will join the Big Ten? Guys, I've looked at the financials. Apparently Notre Dame is getting, I believe, $15 million in a deal with NBC currently. Now, if they wanted to renegotiate that, when it expires, I'm sure it'll get bumped up to at least $30 million. But apparently, the rumor is in this Big Ten Super Conference, each team will be getting $100 million. It's at least 75% more than what Notre Dame would get if they stayed independent. And then, of course, you've got the idea, some Notre Dame fans are saying that Notre Dame should kind of, pin the SEC against the Big Ten, make it a bidding war. I don't think Notre Dame has that leverage. If Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten and says, listen, you need to give us a better offer or else we're going to the SEC, and I'm the Big Ten, I would say, bye-bye. I think they're bluffing. I think Notre Dame, zero chance Notre Dame goes to the SEC. If Notre Dame wants to go to the SEC, that's fine. They can go. But when you're looking at the teams, the academics, the way everything lines up, it makes complete sense for Notre Dame to join the Big Ten. Obviously, it would make even more sense for Notre Dame to go to the ACC because they face like 5 ACC teams every year. But at this point, the ACC is on the verge of collapsing. The only saving grace to the ACC is if they were able to get Notre Dame somehow to join them, which is not going to happen because they have a horrible TV contract that is in place through 2036. So the ACC has major problems, and those schools like Clemson and Florida State are going to somehow have to circumvent and get out of that contract to be able to potentially go to the SEC. I believe the next major move is Notre Dame to the Big Ten, Oregon and Washington possibly to the Big Ten, definitely Oregon, and then the SEC possibly responding with the major ACC teams going there, including Clemson to the SEC, Florida State to the SEC, North Carolina to the SEC. I don't know what Duke would do, but you would have to think Duke and North Carolina are a package deal due to the basketball rivalry. And then after that, you would have the Pac-12 open for business. All those teams would be open to getting poached, and I would look for Arizona, Arizona State as two teams possibly headed to the Big 12, because the Big 12 is just trying to stay relevant, and they could kind of have their own super conference. So we've got the idea of three different super conferences at play, the two major super conferences, the Big 10 and the SEC, and then kind of the minor super conference in the Big 12 if they're able to poach some teams from the ACC, from the Pac-12. If the ACC disbands, if Oregon leaves the Pac-12, it's going to be a complete disaster. And guys, I don't like any of this. I wish we went back to the normal, standard, regional college football. I'm fine with Nebraska being in the Big Ten. But guys, this idea that a team from California can be in the same division as a team from New Jersey, or in the same conference as a team from New Jersey, it's la la land. It makes no sense. And of course, it doesn't have to make sense. The only thing that makes sense is the amount of money that USC is now going to make joining the Big Ten. And obviously USC wanted to join the Big Ten because they align academically more with the Big Ten, and the Big Ten is certainly going to accept USC because it's just going to make them more money. You've got two teams from California now. That's just going to make you more money in terms of your TV deal. That's going to set up major matchups like Michigan going to the Rose Bowl, like USC going to the Shoe. Right? So it all has to come down to money. And guys, with Notre Dame, it seems like a when, not if, on when they're joining the Big Ten. And it makes more sense that this happens ASAP. And the Big Ten has said, listen, we need an answer from Notre Dame, and then we'll let Oregon join after we get an answer from Notre Dame. If Notre Dame is in, Oregon also is in, and that's when the super conference really starts forming, and that's when you'll start seeing a response from the SEC, who kicked this whole thing off last year by getting Texas and Oklahoma. Then they will respond, and they will expand to 18 or 20 teams by poaching possibly teams in the ACC, but those teams have that horrible TV deal they are currently under until the year 2036, which is going to be a legal nightmare to get out of that thing. I mean, you could get out of a TV deal if it ended in 2025 or 2026. 2036? That is going to be crazy. But guys, there is major stuff happening, and it'll be very interesting to see how these two super conferences form. See, originally we thought it was just two super conferences. It might be a third lower tier super conference with the Big 12, because they're going to try and poach the SEC teams and maybe some of the lower tier ACC teams like a Virginia, because Virginia, great basketball program, maybe a Boston College, a Wake Forest, teams like that. They're going to try and expand to around 20 teams if they can. I've heard a lot of rumors and a lot of stories come out about like Arizona and Arizona State going to the Big 12. So each conference is the big status right now. The Pac-12 is basically dead. The Big 12 is trying to form their own super conference to stay relevant. The SEC is waiting to see what the Big 10 does with Notre Dame and Oregon. The Big 10 is waiting on Notre Dame. And if Notre Dame joins, they will also add Oregon. And then the ACC is sitting there begging Notre Dame and hoping that because Notre Dame has a past relationship with them and kind of a negotiation where Notre Dame, even though they're an independent, they always face 4 or 5 teams from the ACC. Maybe that could lure Notre Dame to the ACC, but it's a losing battle. I don't even think the ACC thinks they're getting Notre Dame at this point. They might just be trying to keep their team and their conference together. They have a horrible TV deal, and this is all based on money, so whoever pays me the most is where I'm going. That's why we see 2 teams from California join the Big Ten, because they pay the most, and that's where they're going, and that's why these super conferences are happening. It is completely inorganic. It is completely dysfunctional, but this is the current status and the way college football is happening. It's sad. It makes me sad, but it is fun to talk about and speculate on. So does Notre Dame decide soon? Again, this tweet, it says Notre Dame doesn't want to keep, institutions waiting. Isn't that what they always do? It seems, I don't know, it seems like, but maybe this is different. Maybe Notre Dame will decide soon because USC and UCLA going to the Big Ten is so major. Maybe that'll kickstart Notre Dame into deciding that they do not want to be an independent. They want to join the Big Ten, and they're going to get way more revenue in result of joining the Big Ten. I think they're going to do it. It could happen within the next week or month. We'll see. It's a developing situation. We'll continue to follow it, guys. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. Link to that's always in the description. I'm, of course, the Depressed Ginger. Thank you for watching.